Welcome back. But first to the concerning decision by the Albanese government to issue 860 visas for Palestinians between October 7 and November 20. Now, I've had a good look at the subclass 600 visa, the one Foreign Minister Penny Wong said was being used to grant the 860 Palestinians entrance to Australia. And as far as I can tell, applicants apply for the visa online. Things like ID checks and police reports are not mandatory. In fact, the website says only that they may be required. Worse still, if they are sought, they would be supplied by the Palestinian Authority, I presume in Ramallah, so questionable in terms of veracity, to say the least. The website also says, as I outlined a little earlier in the show, that individuals don't even need to put in the application themselves. Someone else can do it for them. So not onerous at all, is it? And with that sort of lax paperwork required, alarm bells start ringing for me, given recent polls that show 75% support by Palestinian Arabs in Gaza for the Hamas terror attack on October 7 that murdered over 1,200 innocent Israeli civilians. Joining me now to discuss this, Shadow Minister for Home Affairs, Senator James Paterson. Well, I have to say, all in all, it's pretty worrying. Penny Wong assured us that all the appropriate checks are being done. But if it is this visa class, which she says it is, you have a look online, James, and there's a concern.
Peter, you've set it out perfectly well there. There's a whole reason that we should be really concerned about this. There's a whole lot of red flags that we should be worried about this. The Australian government has no presence on the ground in Gaza, obviously. There is no functioning state or government in Gaza. To the extent it is, it's run by a terrorist organisation. Even just verifying the identity of these people will be difficult, given the context, let alone doing adequate checks on their security and their associations. I am really worried that corners have been cut here, that these visas have been issued without appropriate scrutiny, and that it will be too late if we discover down the track that mistakes have been made.
I do know when we had the issue on the steps of the Sydney Opera House, I mean, there were calls immediately that if these people were on visas, were not Australian citizens, they should be removed from this country. Of course, we didn't see any evidence that that happened. And we've had a number of recent polls, including the one I just quoted there, 75% support, not for Hamas, but support for what Hamas did on the 7th of October.
That's right, Peter. And even if every single one of these people is a completely innocent civilian, genuinely applied, we have to be really careful about the attitudes that we'd be welcoming into this country and the consequences for social cohesion in this country. I don't want to see any more Sydney Opera Houses. But of course, it wouldn't be beyond Hamas to try to sneak someone into this cohort. We know they are trying to get their operatives out of Gaza, out of harm's way, out of the way of the IDF. Why wouldn't they try and take advantage of Australia or other countries that are good-natured and likely to welcome humanitarian applicants? I mean, the Prime Minister said today, in a way to try and reassure us, don't worry, these are just temporary visas. They might only be here for a few months. But you can bet once they're here, they're going to try and stay here, and they'd be well within their rights to make an application for a humanitarian visa to stay here permanently.
The Foreign Minister yesterday, when pushed on this, basically then pivoted and pointed to the number of Israelis that have come here to Australia. But of course, Israel's a functional democratic state. There are checks and balances. We have a large, well-staffed embassy in that country. That's the difference.
That's spot on, Peter. It's a rule of law, liberal democracy with a functional state, with an established Australian presence on the ground. Very easy to identify people, great criminal records to check whether someone's committed a crime or other issues. Very easy to verify. It couldn't be any more different from Gaza. And I think that was pretty underhanded of Penny Wong to try and make that false equivalence there. These are two very different circumstances and should be treated as completely separate.
I am not surprised. I am dismayed, though, to hear reports today in The Australian that late this afternoon it has been reported that a boat looks like it's arrived on Australia's shore, an illegal boat. We still don't know a whole lot of detail, but what can you tell us?
Well, this is entirely predictable, as you say, Peter. When Labor gets in, this movie is the same every time. They soften the successful border protection policies of the coalition, they water them down, the boats start again and human tragedy follows. And it appears in this case that a group of men have been identified off the northwest coast of Western Australia in a very remote area who were not supposed to be there, who may have been dropped there by a boat, and the boat appears to have since disappeared. And their identities are still trying to be established. There are some that may be be missing that police are looking for right now, and details will emerge, I suspect, in the following days that will give us more rich picture about what happened. But where is the government? Where is the Minister for Home Affairs? Where is Claire O'Neil? Why hasn't she stood up and been honest with the public about what it is that we know and what we don't know? I mean, this government is completely lacking in transparency and competence when it comes to border protection.
Well, we know where the Minister is today. She's gone to ground. So has the Immigration Minister. We had, I guess, calamity yesterday in the media appearances, unable to confirm how many of the detainees, now over 100 released into the community, how many of those are wearing ankle bracelets, how many are monitored. She seemed, Claire O'Neil, to be at odds with comments made by the WA Police Commissioner. And there's a real sense, yes, they were caught napping. Yes, they relied on you and Peter Dutton and others to bolster that legislation through the Parliament. But now that they have the legislation, they don't seem to be even implementing it as safely as they should.
It keeps getting worse and worse and worse on this issue. I mean, yesterday, the Minister for Home Affairs, who is responsible for her department, who is responsible for Australian Border Force, said she could not answer, did not know whether or not electronic monitoring, which is supposed to be mandatory, had actually been enforced, and if so, how many people. And she tried to handball to Immigration Minister Giles, who has been in witness protection this week for obvious reasons, and not take responsibility. She's the senior minister in the portfolio. Border protection is her policy responsibility. Community safety falls on her. If she doesn't know or doesn't care to ask, that says something very worrying about this government's attitude to protecting the community from what are serious offenders. And as you say, the numbers keep creeping up every day. You know, only a few weeks ago, it was only going to be 92. Even before that, it was only going to be 1. And now we're into the hundreds. I mean, how many people does Labor plan to release into the community, and what conditions are going to be imposed on them?
Senator Patterson, thank you for your time. I tell you what, if I listen to my viewers, they want you in the job. You're the only one at the moment who gives them much confidence. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Peter.
He's dogged, isn't he? Coming up, we'll speak to the Queensland Opposition Leader